From coast to coast, the Pac-12 to the SEC and every conference in between, Stoney Keeley and Stephen McCash break down all the action from the week that was in college football, react to the AP Top 25 poll, talk Heisman race, and dive into all of the most interesting lines of the week based on what the odds makers are saying in the SEC and on the national scale. This is the College Football Roundup on Sobros Network.
Welcome back for another episode of the College Football Roundup right here on Sobros Network. Mind's right, ass is tight as we tackle episode 5 for you today, powered by Memo's Mexican Kitchen out in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. For my money, it is the best Mexican food in the Nashville area, just a mile north of I-40 off of the Mount Juliet exit. Go check them out sometime. Let them know Stoney and the Sobros sent you. And if you want to check out their menu online, go to memosmexicankitchen.com. Follow them on Instagram at Memos Mexican Kitchen. Stephen McCash, utility man, Sobros Network, with me as always. Is it hard to believe, McCash, that we're 5 episodes into the 2024 season already?
And we're only 3 weeks into the season. So my math is a little off, but I'm not mad about it because granted, weeks 1 and 2 gave us some excitement, but we didn't have those, like, outside of a few, we didn't have really meat on the bones when it comes to the schedule. But I think we start to see that change coming this week with some big matchups.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Week 2 was kind of a dud. I think it's okay to say that. There were some big games, obviously the big upset of Notre Dame that we'll talk about, but a lot of, hey, we got our big season opener out of the way. Now we need to fine-tune some things against an FCS opponent kind of stuff. And I don't know about you, but it was a bloodbath for me on the books, man. I didn't like the board to begin with going into week 2 and tank the 401k. Granted, I had an NFL game on there as well, but not good, man. Not good. 1-4 on the week. Did not see a cover from Alabama. Did not see a cover.
They tried.
From Kansas. Yeah, they did. I'm doing the math in the fourth quarter as the team finally wakes up and starts rattling off like 28 points in the last 16 minutes of the game or something like that. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, there's 2 minutes left on the clock. They just get an interception or a fumble return. Maybe they can end up covering this spread. Alas, it was not to be. But man, I'm kind of with you. I've kind of felt like cleanse the palate of week 2. Let's get on to week 3. A lot of conference matchups, a lot of big games going on. But let's talk about the biggest news of the day to kick us off here. The Pac-12 is back, baby. Pac-12 with Oregon State and Washington State, the last 2 teams remaining, adding Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and Colorado State. They still have to get to 8 to maintain their Power 5 status or whatever. And there's some interesting rumors out there, McCash, about who those teams may be. We'll get to that in a second. But for now, I just want to know your impressions after we talked about the Mountain West walking away from the negotiating table. Now, all of a sudden, the Pac-12 seems to have plucked some of the biggest schools from the Mountain West Conference. What do you think about the new look Pac-12?
I mean, when all's said and done, this isn't going to be a Power 5 conference or a Power 4, whatever you call it. It's just going to be the best of the rest.
Yeah.
When it's all said and done. It's going to be it'll be a phenomenal basketball conference with San Diego State and Fresno State as well, Oregon, Washington. I think it'll be a great basketball conference. But as far as football, it's the best of the rest. Yeah. If everything flushes out like the rumors are having.
I look at this as, you know what, we get to bring Pac-12 After Dark back. It might not be the Pac-12 After Dark of old, but we're still gonna get the hashtag. We're still going to get to live it, and I think that's awesome. That's great for college football. Now we talk about the rumors that are out there, right? Because these 4 additions get them to 6. They need to be at 8 to maintain status as a Power 5 conference or whatever, which I don't even know what the implications are for the college football playoff or anything like that. But right now, it sounds like Memphis is awfully attractive to the Pac-12. And we know Memphis probably should have, at least in this show's opinion, I think I'm safe in speaking for you. Memphis probably should have gotten a more serious, longer look from the Big 12, and they didn't. And now they're that team that has the NIL money, that has the FedEx money behind them. The football team is rolling right now. We know what they are in basketball as well, the storied program there. Getting into the central time zone, I don't know. Memphis kind of looks like, if you are trying to maintain status quo as a Power 5 conference, Memphis, though they don't make a lot of sense geographically for a conference that says they want to maintain the West Coast, I think they are a very attractive addition when you look at who's available right now.
I think I agree with you, but I have given up on the logistics of things making sense when it comes to geography in college football because Stanford is in the ACC now.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That makes sense. I think Stanford and Cal may be having buyer's remorse right now.
Yeah.
With what's going on in the Pac-12.
Man, and the thing is, there've been a lot of people that have said, "Oh, well, this opens the door for Stanford and Cal to leave the ACC and come back." But from what I've heard, the way these contracts were drawn up, it's going to be awfully hard for them to do. And there are people that think the only way that happens is if Clemson and Florida State leave the conference and the whole thing crumbles in their wake. Yeah. And then it opens it up for Stanford and Cal to return to the Pac-12. But it sounds like that's kind of an unrealistic option right now. And I think you're right. I think these two schools have to be looking at themselves like, you got to be kidding me. We've done this, and now the Pac-12 is going to survive after plucking the Mountain West. Another team that's been in the fold is Tulane, the Green Wave, a program that you and I have been high on. It's a big market. It's a school that's had some success in their football program the last several years. Saying specifically, like, that's a big TV market closer to the East Coast. They don't want to just be slotted at 9 o'clock kickoffs in Central Time every week. They like having a presence closer to the East Coast, the earlier time zone. What do you think about Tulane as an option for the Pac-12?
Tulane makes perfect sense as well when it comes to joining. They would be the academic standard for the conference, because that is a tremendously hard school to get into and to achieve at. It would be the Vanderbilt, if you will, of the Pac-12, or what Stanford used to be.
Sure.
Not that any of the schools in the old Pac-12 were slumps when it came to academics, but what I think would be smart is Tulane, Memphis, and I'll throw in San Antonio and South Florida. If the four of them were to come together and say, it's all of us or none of us, and you put a united front together, because you're going to need more than just two more teams to really have a solid conference.
Sure.
I think if you're going to pluck away from the AAC, you got to take the top four.
Yeah, and Texas San Antonio is another team that has been rumored to be in talks with the Pac-12 because, man, you want to talk about TV markets. If you can start getting into Texas, then that could be a potential gold mine, right? Like, that's a market that this conference definitely wants to be in. But I was going to ask if there were any other teams out there that you had thought maybe the Pac-12 should consider or you think makes sense. My answer was actually going to be South Florida. So I'm with you on that. I think it's a program that makes a lot of sense for, an up-and-coming program, the trajectory, trying to move up the ranks in college football. Adding the state of Florida gives you a little bit a more robust reach. And man, you think like Tulane, Memphis, Texas, San Antonio, and South Florida to the 6 Pac-12 teams now, that's, that's going to be a pretty fun little conference to watch.
Yeah.
Outside of South Florida, is there anybody else that you think the Pac-12 might take a look at?
I mean, the The only one that really makes sense to me would be UNLV, but
I looked at them too. Yeah.
yeah, I've heard, but out East Coast wise, the rumblings I've heard outside of those 4 we mentioned, and they make no sense to me, other
Yeah.
than the fact that they've had success recently in football, and that's App State and Liberty.
Oh
I
man.
I don't think those 2 schools are ready for that kinda leap yet when it
No.
comes to it. But for me, when it comes down to the teams that are gonna join the teams out west, how does it make sense financially for you? What's your TV contract gonna be like? Because if you're Memphis, Tulane, South Florida, you're having to spend all this extra money to travel out to the West.
Yeah.
Not just basketball, not just football, but you got like Memphis's women's soccer teams is ranked 7th in the nation. Now they're going out to San Diego and so forth. That costs extra money and such. You got,
Sure.
your baseball teams and such. There's a lot of more money involved and pieces involved other than just football and basketball when you're making a leap like this.
It's a great point. Yeah. And as for the value, what value it adds to the new additions, aside from TV contracts and, the geographical questions, I think it's as simple as, what, the Pac-12 brand, I think probably still means something to the casual football fan. I mean, you and I come on here and we talk about college football every week. We're breaking down midnight games in the Mountain West on this show. I think for you and I, we can look at it and say, well, this isn't really the Pac-12, but I think for the casual viewer, that name brand may still mean something, and it might be something that can be funneled into, a recruiting pitch. Come play in the Pac-12. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah.
spitballing here, but I think the brand probably does still mean something. I do think that Memphis and Tulane probably make the most sense. And unless something just can't be reached, I think those are probably the logical 2 choices. If you had gun to your head prediction, what do you think the 2 teams would be that would be added to the Pac-12 beyond these 4?
Tulane and San Antonio. I think
Okay.
Memphis says no.
Okay. All right. That's
I,
interesting.
I
You
think
mentioned.
Memphis is holding out for the ACC.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's spicy. I like that. Yeah. You mentioned UNLV in there too, and I feel like that is probably the combination of big market, sexy team. How much of their lack of, I don't want to say history, but they're not a historically productive program. Right now, they've got Barry Odom there. They damn near won the Mountain West last year. They're looking like contenders this year. But is this something that is going to be sustainable long term for this program? Is Barry Odom just going to get another job back in the SEC somewhere, and then UNLV falls back to mediocrity? Does that kind of weigh into the conversation at all? Because I would have looked at that program and thought they would have been one of these 4 instead of Colorado State right now.
I think they're an attractive choice, and I think even if they change head coaches or whatnot, they're kind of like Memphis was 20 years ago when Tommy West came into the program and kind of raised it from the ashes. That team had sucked for my whole lifetime until Tommy West came around and brought in D'Angelo Williams and other players like that to get us reveling.
Man.
And
Yeah.
then, so we've had a nice coaching tree since then. We got Brian Silverfield now. We had Justin Fuente, Mike
Oh, yeah.
Norvell. That's a nice little tree of the last 15 years of head coaches at our program that's taken us step by step to where we're now in the conversation of getting a real chance at a bigger conference. And with that said, I think UNLV's kind of in that boat when it comes to their football program. Everybody knows what they did in basketball back in the 90s under the Shark
Sure.
and whatnot. And there's obviously it's a sexy place to be to go visit for games and whatnot. It's an easy place to sell when it comes to like hosting your conference championship game there at the Raiders Stadium and things like that. I'm with you. I think UNLV to me is a no-brainer as being one of those teams that should maybe not have gotten the first wave of an invite, but definitely on that second tier because I put them ahead of San Diego State right now because that's a program that's been well over the last couple of decades, but they've kind of declined here recently.
All right, the Pac-12 is back, baby. That's the bottom line. I'm stoked about it. Let's recap. There are 3 games specifically that I want to talk about from week 2 before we get to this loaded week 3 lineup. Texas, Michigan, the biggest game of the week. The Longhorns, that man, they got up 24-3 at the half. They expand that lead to 31-6. Finishes 31-12 in a game that, frankly, to me, didn't even feel that close as that final score would indicate. Michigan had won 23 straight at home coming into this game, but the Texas offense, they were doing whatever they wanted on Saturday. Quinn Ewers was out there slinging it. He's now the Heisman favorite on many sports books. Surprise for me was how Texas kind of out-physicaled Michigan. Michigan, the Wolverines, known for a tough, bruising style. It's part of how they won the national championship last year. Texas, not so much under Steve Sarkisian, but they went into the big house and they really bullied Michigan around. I think the question that arises out of that for me, McCash, is if you're a Texas fan, one of the things that we've talked about with the move to the SEC is how are they going to hold up against a more physical brand of football week in and week out? Does how they played against Michigan affect your opinion of how they can hold up playing physical SEC style football in 2024?
I mean, it showed me that they can do it. I mean, their defense is the main key to reason why they not only won that game but dominated.
Yeah,
I thought the game was won and lost on third down.
sure.
Texas went 10 for 16 on third down in the big house of all places, while Michigan, the home team, could only manage to go 3-12. So that Texas defense was rested the whole game because they were able to get off the field quickly, turning a lot of 3-and-outs. So Texas constantly being able to put the ball back into the hands of Quinn Ewers was the difference to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? You're seeing the ill effects of Michigan, Michigan losing 6 of their top offensive linemen to the NFL. That Texas defense was just able to tee off on them week in or play in and play out. Looking at the body of work and just how good Texas looked in week 2, looking at how Georgia has played, Ohio State, Alabama, we know struggled. This pack at the top of college football right now, do you think it's fair to at least ask at this point, is Texas the best team in the country?
I still think there's 2 teams ahead of them, but we will know here in the next month where Texas really lies in that scenario. They have their next 3 games are, basically cupcake wins for them. They got San Antonio this week, UL Monroe, and then they finally go into the SEC slate of their schedule with Mississippi State before they get into that tough stretch with Oklahoma and Georgia back to back. So they should be well rested, going into that Oklahoma matchup at 5-0, I believe, 5 or 6-0 at that point in the season. And Oklahoma is obviously a foe that they're very familiar with, playing year in and year out in their old conference. So it'll be interesting to see the Red River showdown, whatever the hell they call it.
It's the Red River rivalry now. It used to be the
Okay.
Red River shootout, but they had to
Shootout.
change that because
It's not PC.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But let's say they get through those 2 games undefeated and unscathed. They're going to go undefeated because all they have left on their schedule would be Vanderbilt, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and A&M.
Yeah. So
no Alabama, no Ole Miss. There's nobody there.
Potential to stack some wins there in that stretch. So I think I'm kind of with you. I think I'm willing to accept that Texas is closer to Georgia than I had initially thought, and I'm also willing to concede that Texas looks better than I initially thought. And this is a team that looked pretty good this time last year and then kind of cooled off a little bit, but then got hot at the right time and just couldn't finish the deal against Washington. So I think there's a little bit of that's provided a chip on the shoulder for this team, and they're playing with a little more conviction, a little more attitude. And I'm willing to say that they are probably one of the best. I think they're definitely one of the 4 best teams in the country. And I think right now I'm kind of trending towards a Texas-Georgia runoff for the national championship at this point. Let's talk about Michigan. This situation at quarterback, man.
Cool.
Davis Warren, 22 of 33 for 204 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. McCash, he threw for an average of 6.2 yards per completion, QBR of 47.6. It's not good, man. And Michigan as a whole looked lost. So do you think there's any chance that they make the switch to Alex Orji, who is more of a dynamic run threat, dual threat kind of quarterback, or do they ride it out with Davis Warren? And does this quarterback situation kind of put a cap on how far this Michigan team can go?
Well, I didn't have high hopes for Michigan this year to begin with because of how
Fair
much
enough.
they lost, and plus they lost the guy who pulled the strings there, and Harbaugh going to San Diego. So I knew there was going to be a drop off this year. I think the fans expect it, and I think I'm not going to say they're okay with it, but they're accepting of it because of the fact they are riding the wave of a national championship. With that said, I'm a little weary to just pull the trigger 2 games in on a quarterback just because of one bad loss. You see what Florida State's doing with DJ right now, whether they go to another quarterback or not.
Yeah.
So I'm still a little anxious to like pull the trigger just yet. But if they got their matchup this week and we get this kind of the same results, then you have to start entertaining them making the move to Alex.
Let's talk about the big upset, man. Northern Illinois never having defeated a top 10 team in program history. They go out there and they upset Notre Dame as 27.5-point underdogs. Quarterback Ethan Hampton had a laser of a touchdown throw that, to me, kind of set the tone early and made the difference in the game. Notre Dame did settle in after a rushing touchdown, but then Riley Leonard throws an ugly interception, which – guy that has some NFL hopes, man. He has not looked the part so far for Notre Dame. Northern Illinois converts a 4th and 2 late in the game. They kick the field goal to go up 16-14, and then they block a field goal from Notre Dame to win. Northern Illinois' defense schematically looked like an NFL defense to me. It looked like the real deal. Like if those guys can play like that throughout the season, that's going to be a nasty unit. Thomas Hammock was crying after the game. Northern Illinois ends up 25th in the AP poll this week for it. Notre Dame is left soul searching. And I ask you, McCash, who does this result say more about?
It says more about Notre Dame just overlooking their opponent when it all comes down to it. Now, I think this loss definitely puts Notre Dame's playoff hopes in jeopardy because they don't have the opportunity to go and win a conference championship, get that automatic qualifier. So they have to win out, and I think they also have to get some help because their schedule is not turning out to be as good as we thought it was going to be earlier in the season with the way teams like Florida State have struggled so far out the gate. But man, hats off to NIU, the Huskies and Tario Brown, I believe how you pronounce the first name.
Tario Brown, yeah.
225 yards of all-purpose yards,
Crazy.
Had an 83-yard touchdown reception. The guy just did everything on offense. And much as I hate to say it, this win by NIU couldn't come at a worse time for me because my beloved Memphis Tigers are fighting for that playoff spot as the Group of 5 rep. And now I've got a team outside of Boise and Tulane and, Liberty that I've got to worry about now.
That's exactly what I was going to ask next. Should we be considering the Huskies a dark horse to win that Group of 5 spot in the college football playoff? I'll say this, McCash. The MAC is looking a little bit better than I thought it would at the top because Miami of Ohio is still a team to be reckoned with. Toledo is still a team to be reckoned with. Northern Illinois throwing its name in the ring or hat in the ring, whatever the saying is.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a fascinating race to watch. And of course, we couldn't go an episode without breaking down the MAC championship race. But do you think Northern Illinois has a shot to kind of rise up and be that surprise team out of the Group of 5 to put some pressure on the Memphises and the Boise States of the college football world?
It's possible, but I just think I really can't say this now. Now that they've beaten Notre Dame, they're playing. They got 2 Power 5 teams or Power 4 teams on their schedule. They've already beat one of them in Notre Dame, And then in 3 weeks, they take on NC State, which,
Ooh, well, that looks winnable.
and it's at NC State. So if they beat NC State, Boise and Memphis are just screwed. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, I mean that there is going to be pressure there to go undefeated for both of those teams. And man, I don't know. I think it's really spicy. And I think the thing that I said earlier about their defense looking schematically sound is that's hard to win against, because you're not relying upon talent. You have guys that are in the right place, doing the right thing, disciplined and executing. And if you can get some juice on offense, man, your defense can win you a game. And I think that's a good formula for this team to win some ball games. We'll see how it holds up down the stretch. Alabama and South Florida. Man, Alabama desperately needs Caden Proctor to get healthy and come back to that offensive line. The right tackle that subbed for him had a million penalties. It was just terrible. And the team as a whole just kind of couldn't wake up. It felt like they were sleepwalking for 3 quarters, and then boom, Jam Miller puts the team on his back. Ryan Williams is making big plays. They post 210 yards of offense in the fourth quarter to come back and win this race. I don't know, man. Hats off to South Florida in the American Conference race at this point. Gutsy performance from quarterback Byron Brown. What do you think of South Florida and the performance they put on against Alabama on Saturday night?
Well, it didn't shock me because they did the same thing last year down in Tampa against Alabama. Granted, the game was in the midst of like a hurricane storm or whatever, but it was 17-3, I believe, was the final score of that game. So it was really close the whole game long until Alabama, I think, was able to score, a late touchdown to really put it away. I love South Florida. I should say I love South Florida. They're a rival of mine in the AAC, but I really like this team. We knew they were going to take a step forward this year, and they really showed it this past week. They're a sneaky good team. I'll put them third behind Memphis and Tulane in that AAC race, now that San Antonio has kind of showed us their colors after the way they got dismantled this past week.
Yeah.
But they do travel to Tulane towards the end of the year, but they do host Memphis a couple of weeks after that. So if they're for real in this AAC, they're going to have the opportunities to showcase it.
Alex Galesh was in that Tennessee system, coached under Josh Heupel, ran tempo against Alabama on Saturday night, and listen, they were moving up and down the field. The scoreboard might not have been lighting up the way they wanted to see, but they were able to make plays against Alabama. If you're a Tide fan, McCash, how does that game make you feel, knowing that system is going to show up here in about a month or so with a lot more significant uptick in talent in the Tennessee Volunteers? I am a Tide fan. I watched the game and I went into it kind of thinking like, oh boy, if this is the result now, if they don't button themselves up, Tennessee's going to be a problem in a month. But what do you think that this game says about that game?
It says a lot, because it'll give Alabama some familiarity when it comes to that kind of tempo and such. But the talent disparity between South Florida and Tennessee is night and day. Nico and company, as much as you say you're an Alabama fan, you're as an equal Alabama fan as I am an equal Tennessee hater. And so it hates me to give them their props, but Tennessee is not only good, but they might be great.
Yeah.
When it all comes down to it. I don't have their schedule in front of me, but if it plays out, kind of favorable for them, I could see them in Atlanta giving Georgia or Texas a run for their money.
Well, we've talked about Alabama. We've talked about Texas so far. Other big wins in the SEC this past weekend: Georgia, Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee. They're kind of holding steady as the top 6 in the conference right now. But I'm curious who you think is the best of the bunch in this conference right now, because I kind of feel like now that we've seen some action on the field, I think the margins are a little more razor thin than we initially gave it credit for. I don't think there's much that separates 1 from 6 right here. Who do you have as the best team in the SEC right now?
Well, I'm a little upset you're going to completely ignore the only undefeated team in conference play so far this year, the South Carolina Gamecocks.
Well, fair enough. Okay,
They're the they're the only team with a win in the SEC right now.
let's throw South Carolina in there. Then you think South Carolina is the best team in the
Absolutely not.
SEC? Go for it.
Absolutely not. No, until they're beaten, Georgia is the best team for me. But my top 5 would go Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee. And then that Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee, you could shuffle those week in and week out on who's 3 through 5 for me. I don't believe in Missouri.
I'll tell you what, I am with you in the sentiment that until they're beaten, I think Georgia is still the top dog. But I will say Tennessee and Ole Miss have looked like the two cleanest, most prolific, most dominant teams in the conference so far. I like Texas. I'm not insinuating that they don't belong in this class as well, but I'm saying based on the expectations, I think we thought Texas would be here. I don't think even I thought Ole Miss and Tennessee would be this dominant so far. Now, I know Ole Miss has played Furman and MTSU, but still from an operational standpoint, I'm eager to see them. Jackson Dart has been fantastic. I'm excited to see them with an uptick in competition as the schedule moves along. And then Tennessee, man, the way they dominated NC State, who was a 3-3-5 defense that had given Tennessee problems under Heupel in its history, to just be blown out like that, I think speaks a lot to the level of talent that Tennessee has. If they keep playing like this, I'm not going to be surprised if either of these teams ends up in Atlanta playing for the SEC championship. This week in the top 25, new additions, we have Iowa State after crushing defeat of Iowa. I thought I was going to win that bet. I was big on the Hawkeyes. I called the Hawkeyes a playoff team, and they're up 17-6 late in that game before Iowa State comes back. Gutsy performance. Boston College, a surprise 2-0. Now they're in the AP top 25. And Nebraska joining the fold as well after pantsing Colorado on Saturday night, along with Northern Illinois, new entries into the top 25. Which of these teams do you think is actually the most legit, McCash?
Okay, well, I'll say when it comes to Iowa State, they have a great quarterback in Rocco Beck. I've actually got to see him in person. He is just as good as advertised. And they'll be a tough out in their conference, but won't really be tested until the second half of the season when they face off with Kansas, Utah, and Kansas State. And Utah is starting to show me that they might not be for real with all the issues they're still having with Cam Rising and such, and you hate to see it. Boston College, I think out of the 3 of those new teams, they are fraudulent because they're being rewarded for a big win over an overrated FSU team. And I'm not saying that because Memphis is taking on them this week, but I mean, the stats show you lost to Georgia Tech and Boston College to start off the season. And I think Missouri, they take on Missouri this week. I think Missouri will bring the Eagles back down to reality this weekend. So for me, the real team out of this 3 that I think has a chance to do something this year is Nebraska. Because of the 3 in question, the Cornhuskers are the most believable to me. If they continue to average over 30 points a game, and that defense will continue to give opposing quarterbacks problems and force turnovers, they'll find themselves giving teams like Ohio State all they can handle in the Big Ten race before the season's over with.
I'm going with Iowa State for a lot of the reasons that you outlined. I love the head coach. They're going to build a statue to that man outside that stadium once he's gone, but they've got the quarterback. It kind of reminds me of the way the talent kind of developed around Brock Purdy when he was on that run at Iowa State. And I won't be surprised if this team does make a little bit of noise in the Big 12. One more game I wanted to talk about. Oregon outlasting Boise State, 3-point victory for the Ducks. Oregon still not looking quite right, man. What's going on with the Ducks?
Your guess is as good as mine because I had them as one of my favorites to contend for the national championship this year.
Me too.
And they just have not, shown the results of that. And I mean, granted, you're 2-0 is 2-0. You really can't complain too much, but I mean, they're playing with the big boys now, and if they don't get things turned around soon and righting that ship, they won't be anywhere near sniffing the playoffs.
You think there's any chance Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State, the running back, can get into the Heisman race? Because right now, dude has like 9 touchdowns already. He's averaging 10.2 yards per carry. I don't have his numbers in front of me, but he's already had like 700 or 400 and some odd yards in just a couple of games. I'm kind of looking at it like I'm not all that impressed by what some of the quarterbacks have done so far. Why not put the Boise State running back in the Heisman watch?
He's a bad man. He's averaging 10 yards a carry because he's rushed 45 times for 459 yards and 9 touchdowns. That means if my grade school math is still what it is, 1 out of every 5 carries results in a touchdown for him.
Yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, I pulled up the numbers. Yeah. 192 yards, 3 touchdowns against the Ducks. That puts him up atop the FBS with 459 on the season, 9 touchdowns. He is on pace, McCash, to run for 2,754 yards this season. It's ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah.
let's give him some love. I'm tired of the Heisman just being a quarterback award.
I'm hoping because obviously he'll go into the draft next year. I'm hoping he is what turns the NFL back to loving the running backs again, and like he's a top 10 pick and whatnot. And then we get away from overpaying these mediocre quarterbacks you think are going to do something in the NFL. I'm talking to you, Kirk Cousins in Atlanta, and some other player, Derek Carr in New Orleans. People are making $40-50 million a year to like do nothing.
You got to pay somebody. You got to have somebody do it.
I'd rather go pay Ryan Tannehill again.
No, don't you dare. You hate Ryan Tannehill.
Not as much as I hate Kirk Cousins, the Atlanta Falcons.
I'm with it. Well, before we shift gears and talk about week 3 action, I do want to mention our sponsor, Memo's Mexican Kitchen out in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. For my money, it is the best Mexican food in the Nashville area. My wife and I were just there a couple of Friday nights ago. Needed one of those meals that are just, it's good for your soul. You get a cocktail. I had the Summer Peach Collins, nice, refreshing beverage to go with my grilled jalapenos that we started with, the chips and salsa, the guacamole. It's all fantastic. It's the authentic stuff too. It's the chunks of avocados, tomatoes, and onions, cilantro, and jalapenos. It's not just everything mashed together. It's a really, really good setting to have a meal in. Enjoy a conversation with your loved one. And by the end of it, you're just feeling better. You're feeling a little more fulfilled and satisfied. At least I was a couple of weeks ago. We went with the tacos. We hadn't had the tacos in a while. I go with the quesadilla. The enchiladas there are fantastic. But we were just kind of feeling tacos. And their steak is such high quality. I had to go with the steak tacos. It delivered a fantastic meal. We were super happy with it. And I'm confident that you'll be happy with your meal at Memo's as well. So give them a shot. Whether you're in Mount Juliet or not, it's worth the drive out there, just a mile north of I-40 off the Mount Juliet exit. If you want to check out their menu, you can do so online at memosmexicankitchen.com. Give them a follow on Instagram at Memo's Mexican Kitchen. Head out there, let them know Stoney and the Sobros sent you, and enjoy what I call the finest Mexican food in the Nashville, Tennessee area. All right, McCash, week 3, absolutely loaded. We are going to see some dominoes starting to fall. First things first, we got a game tonight between a couple of undefeated teams. It looks like it's going to be an electric factory the way that these two teams are scoring right now. Talking about 2-0 Texas State, who, by the way, we haven't talked about, could be another one of those dark horse group of 5 teams that might put some pressure on the Boise's and the Memphises of the world. They are hosting Arizona State, 2-0 as well. The spread right now, courtesy of ESPN Bet, is Texas State minus 2.5. So they're favored in this one at home. What do you think about their chances to stave off a surprisingly spry 2-0 Arizona Sun Devils team?
I give Texas State a slight edge in this game, and think they will take home the win. Well, they're already home, but take the win. But more than anything, I love the over in this game.
Yes.
59.5. I'll take that all day long. And in fact, I did in Tank the 401k that you can read right here on
Right.
Sobros Network.
SobrosNetwork.com. Hit it up. A couple of big games on Friday as well. We've got UNLV, who we've talked about quite a bit, going to Kansas City to play the Kansas Jayhawks, who are 1-1 after a disappointing loss to Illinois last week. That was one of my bets as well. Kansas just couldn't maintain any level of consistency against the fighting Brett Bielema's of Illinois. UNLV, we've talked about it being an emerging team. Doesn't really look like they're getting a whole lot of respect in this spot from the books. ESPN Bet has the Jayhawks as a 9-point favorite with a point total set at 57.5. Do you give the Rebs any shot?
Oh, absolutely. I honestly kind of think the wrong team is favored here. I love UNLV coming in on the road because I know you were high on Kansas at the beginning of the year. That hasn't turned out so well for the
Nope.
Jayhawks. Vegas, whoever you want to talk to, is not giving the UNLV much more than a puncher's chance here. But again, I think UNLV gets the big upset here.
So you're saying like win outright, forget the 9 points.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with the 9 points. I think UNLV is going to be tough. I kind of feel like Illinois exposed Kansas a little bit in a way that, well, I'll put it this way. I think UNLV is perfectly capable of beating Kansas the way that Illinois beat Kansas as well. So I don't think that's that outright crazy to say. I do kind of like UNLV at that 9-point number right there. Also on Friday night, a matchup between ranked teams. This is going to be a fantastic quarterback matchup as well. We've got the 14th ranked 2-0 Kansas State Wildcats, led by dual threat quarterback Avery Johnson, hosting in Bill Snyder Family Stadium right there in the Little Apple of Manhattan, Kansas. The 20th ranked 2-0 Arizona Wildcats, led by Noah Fafita at quarterback. Good offensive line. We know about T-Mac, Tetaroa McMillan, first-round draft pick at wide receiver. This one looks like there's going to be some firepower galore as well. The books say Kansas State -7, but that point total is set at 60.5 right now. What's your read on this one, McCash?
I think I would take the under in this one.
Okay.
Just slightly. I just think you're going to get a little more defense. And I think it'll be a high scoring game where it's like, I don't know, like 28-24 or something like that, where you're in those last 3-4 minutes of the fourth quarter needing like a field goal or something to go over, and you just don't get it for whatever reason. But when it comes to the line and such, I like Kansas State to win, but I think Arizona is going to keep it close. So I would take Arizona plus the points.
I do too. I think it's going to be a shootout. It might not be a fireworks show. I'm going to distinguish between the two, I swear.
All right.
Shootout means two teams going back and forth. All right. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're scoring, right? There could be, marches down the field that stall both ways. I think it's a tense, close game, like you said. Fireworks show is when there is just no defense and teams are just touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. I think it's going to be more of the former there. I think it is going to be a bit of a shootout, a blow for blow kind of matchup. But I like Arizona to cover 7 points. I don't think that they win it outright necessarily. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but I think playing that 7-point spread is a much safer play here. My 2 cents. Let's go to Saturday morning, the 11 o'clock slate. Some pretty big games here. Alabama, after struggling against South Florida, goes to Wisconsin, Camp Randall Stadium, where they will be facing a 2-0 Wisconsin Badgers team. Alabama, 16-point favorites, point total at 50.5. What's your read on this one, McCash?
I don't care if this game was played on the moon or in Siberia. Give me Alabama minus $1 million. I think Alabama wins by 20 plus in this game. Wisconsin hasn't shown me really anything. They played, I don't even know who SDAK is. That San Diego? South Dakota. South Dakota's a good team. So not surprised they struggled there. But then They opened the season against Western Michigan and only could win by 14. I mean,
Yeah.
come on, man. Come on, man.
Well, I think go ahead, finish your thoughts.
No, I
Sorry.
was going to say Alabama all day, every day.
I think the thing about this matchup is that I don't expect Wisconsin to run an up tempo similar style of offense as the South Florida Bulls ran a week ago. I think this style is kind of conducive to rolling over and dying for, for Wisconsin. So I'm with you. I kind of like a more focused, streamlined, maybe dare I say even pissed off Alabama team going up there and getting a dominant win on the road. Big game in the SEC, man. LSU going to Williams-Brice Stadium. You mentioned them earlier. The 2-0 upstart Shane Beamer, South Carolina Gamecocks hosting Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers. LSU is favored by a touchdown. The point total is set at 48.5. This is where the rubber meets the road, man. Are we going to find out that South Carolina is legit, or does LSU cover this one easily?
Well, here's something you may not have known. So prior to the Kentucky, South Carolina game last week, Game Day had decided they were going to go to Kentucky for Kentucky, Georgia.
Oh.
And then what happened in that game happened, and they're like, okay, we don't want to go to Kentucky anymore because that's not going to be a game of any kind of sorts. So, Wildcats, suck it. With that said and done, I haven't been really impressed by LSU this year. But with that being said, despite being 2-0 and 1-0 in the conference, South Carolina is still the worst team, I think, in the SEC. And LSU is going to show them that this weekend. I like LSU to get the win, but that 8.5 does scare me a little bit being on the road. So I would take South Carolina the points.
I'm leaning with you, man. I just don't trust LSU as a favorite on the road in the SEC, even if it is South Carolina, who ultimately I still don't think is going to be very good. So I'm with you there. Your Memphis Tigers. We've been talking about this game since this show started for the 2024 season. They're going to Tallahassee. They are 6.5-point underdogs to a Seminoles team that is absolutely reeling right now at 0-2. What odds do you give your Tigers of pulling off the upset?
Well, oh, shit. Oh, never mind. I saw that the line was 3.5. I was like, there's no way people bet that much on Memphis, but that's where the line opened this week. Never mind. I got real excited there for a second. Look, this game scares me more now than it did at the beginning of the year. Because at the beginning of the year, FSU's a top 10 team. They're posed to be a threat for a national championship game. So us going down to Tallahassee, win or lose, as long as we play them kind of close, we're going to be okay when it comes to our chance at the playoffs. Okay. But now this has turned into a must-win for both teams equally. Mm-hmm. Memphis, obviously, because if we lose, it looks like a bad loss.
It does.
Or a loss, a game we shouldn't lose, because technically, if you look at one side of the rankings, we're ranked when it comes to the coaches. We're 25th in the nation when it comes to coaches, just outside at like 27th in the AP poll. But with that said, FSU, as their backs against the wall, they already know their playoffs chances are pretty much done, if not slim to none at this point.
Yeah.
So their backs are against the wall. I just don't know what you're going to get, because if our defense can punch DJ in that running game in the face a couple of times and get off the field early, cause a turnover or whatever, if we get a good early lead, we're not going to lose this game. I do love Memphis plus the points. I'm taking them on the money line with my own money, but
there you go.
As a regular gambling fan, I would take the points and take the over as well, because I do believe Memphis will score on this team. We're averaging 39 points a game, and I do believe our defense is better than it was last year, but I think Florida State just has so many talented players that it's going to be hard for us to keep them from not scoring a couple of touchdowns. So I love the over in this game too.
Our buddy Jake chimes in the comments, Godspeed Tigers. If you are watching on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever, hop in the comments. Let us know what you think about this week's slate, and we'll react to it in real time. Moving
And
on.
before we
let's
move
see.
on, I will be at the game. I got my
Oh, there
ticket.
you go.
For some reason, my ticket was mailed to me by StubHub, but instead of doing digitally, I don't know how Florida State Doak Campbell Stadium, operates or whatnot. But my ticket was delivered today. I've got my rental car ready, my hotel ready. I'm ready to go. I'm leaving tomorrow afternoon as soon as I clock out.
How about that? Jake also follows up with, remember when the media was trying to gaslight us into thinking DJ was good? How much, like, the reputation of a guy that was a highly recruited prospect at Clemson, man, how all these years later, how can he still be riding that reputation? And I can't think of another prospect like it in recent seasons.
No, I can't either. And I've gone back and watched some highlights from those 2 games so far this year. And like some of his passes are just like not
It's
even
crazy.
close.
Yeah, it's crazy how
Throwing
off he
balls in
is.
the dirt, throwing way over receivers' heads when they're open.
Yeah.
It's baffling.
I
And
mean, this
Mike
guy,
Norvell is a great quarterback coach.
yeah. This is a guy that supposedly had some NFL prospects as well. And I watch him this season. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way he's going to play in the NFL.
He won't play in the UFL.
Let's talk about 2 teams that you have insinuated kind of fraudulent, but another ranked matchup here between the 24th ranked Boston College Eagles going to Columbia, Missouri Memorial Stadium to take on the Missouri Tigers. Mizzou is favored by 16.5, point total currently at 53.5. What gives here, McCash? Who is going to be exposed as fraudulent?
Oh, the Eagles all day, every day.
Yeah,
Look,
I'm
I
with
don't
you.
think Missouri's necessarily a fraudulent team. I just don't think they are a
National title
true
contender.
national title, even
Yeah.
playoff contender. They're a playoff. They might be the first 4 out. Let's say, use a basketball term. When it's all said and done, I just don't think they're really realistically the 6th best team in the nation right now. But with that said, I think they're going to boat race Boston College this weekend, and I love them minus the points.
I do too. I'm with you there. The same exact reason. I think we're flying a little too close to the sun, putting Boston College at 24th in the nation right now. I think they're going to be exposed, and I think Mizzou keeps rolling right there. The Civil War happening pretty early this year. I don't know how I feel about that. I like my Pac-12 traditions and those rivalry games the last week of the season, but that's just me. I have to accept change. Oregon, still the 9th ranked team in the country. Don't really know why. They're going to Corvallis to take on the 2-0 Oregon State Beavers. Oregon State hasn't particularly looked that great at 2-0, but this is still a matchup between undefeated teams. How important is this game for Oregon to get right? What chance do you give them to get right? And what do you make of the 16.5 point number in favor of the Ducks?
So I don't think this is the get right game. This is the get in and let's escape with a W game.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
you're playing a bitter rival, your in-state rival. Granted, you're not conference rivals anymore, but that hatred is still the same when it comes to the fan base and obviously the players as well. I do like Oregon to win, but there's no way I'm giving Oregon minus 14 to any team right now with
Yeah,
what I've seen in these first 2 weeks.
I'm with you. I think this is going to be another case where they win, and we're talking next Wednesday about, wow, what's wrong with the Oregon Ducks? They're still not right. I think the conversation is going to go at least a week longer as well. 2:30 p.m. Your SEC game, Texas A&M going to Florida. The Aggies are favored by 3.5 with a point total set at 48.5. It's a little different from the other numbers we've been talking about here. Indicative of either really good defense or offenses that haven't quite put it together yet. And I think I know which way I'm leaning in this one. 3.5 point favorites are the Aggies. Who needs this one more, McCash?
I mean, that's a hard question to fully answer because A&M on paper has the most talent. I would assume that's how I feel.
I feel that way too. Yeah.
And they're still looking to bounce back from that Notre Dame game because now that Notre Dame loss doesn't look so great after they lost to NIU. But then you have Florida, who has a coach who I do not believe will be there when the season's over with.
Yeah.
So I kind of lean towards it's a bigger game for A&M, but it's a bigger game for Billy Napier. And with that said, I love A&M minus the 3.5 here.
Yep, couldn't have said it better myself. Let's go to the backyard brawl in Pittsburgh this year. Wild game is either last season or a couple of seasons ago on a Thursday night that was just riveting television. Pittsburgh's at 2-0. West Virginia is 1-1. The Mountaineers are favored by 2 on the road. Are you buying Pittsburgh at 2-0 as a potential contender?
I'm not going to lie to you. I have seen nothing about Pittsburgh this year.
They're the quietest 2-0.
Yeah, they could have played the Steelers twice and beat them, and I wouldn't have known. Oh, they beat Cincinnati, but who doesn't beat Cincinnati right now?
Yeah,
And they
they
snuck by. They had to sneak by to get Cincinnati. It's funny to get off the tangent for a second. It's funny how just because your conference name changed, you're suddenly a Power 4 school, even though you're still a Power 5. I mean, a Group of 5 football team.
Yeah. Well,
I don't care if you were in the playoffs a couple years ago.
Anyway, I was about to say they were undefeated.
Yeah, good for them. And I shouldn't say that because I predicted them to be in the playoffs that year. So kudos to me. But with that said, I don't care if they are 2-0. I like West Virginia in this game, and I'll lay those 2 points.
I'm with you, man. I think people are sleeping on how good this West Virginia team is because of how that opening week went. I'm telling people don't sleep on this game between App State and East Carolina. And we don't have to break this one down. App State's favored by 1.5. That number's been bet down. This game was actually in my column. I say take the Pirates, take East Carolina, a surprising 2-0 with a good defense. And App State just hasn't really put it together yet, man. They've got to go to East Carolina. I think the Pirates are going to get to a surprising 3-0. Don't sleep on that game on Saturday. Turn that one over. It's on ESPNU. It'll be a lot of fun to watch. What's next on my list here? Okay, come on down. Come on down. Ole Miss at Wake Forest. Ole Miss ranked number 5 in the nation right now. They are favored by 22.5. Any remote shot that Wake Forest can keep this thing close and hang around?
That's a big negative. I see Ole Miss is. I think I have connectivity issues. I think the storm.
Yep, we got some connectivity issues. All right. All right, McCash is frozen. We only have a few more games on my list that I wanted to talk about, so I'll get through it. I'll answer for McCash. I don't think Wake Forest keeps this thing close. This is not the Wake Forest of yesteryear. I like Ole Miss big in this spot. Moving on, let's talk about what's left on my list here. 100 Miles of Hate in Murfreesboro, Western Kentucky at MTSU.
Hey, there I am.
Hey, there you are. Okay. Are you still with us, McCash? Are we back?
I'm here. Man, I think the hurricane's come to get me. I think I'm gone again.
No, I can hear you, but you're way behind. I think we've got a killer lag going on. I'll just talk. I will just talk to you guys. This is live broadcasting, baby. We are live on the air. 100 Miles of Hate. I might be at that game Saturday night. My wife and I have talked about making the trip out to Murfreesboro. Western Kentucky's favored by 7. I like what Derek Mason's building down there with the Blue Raiders. I'm going to give MTSU a shot to cover that number. And then the last game I wanted to talk about was the big showdown between Georgia and Kentucky from Lexington, Georgia, 23.5-point favorites. Kentucky stinks. Take the Bulldogs. That gets us right to an hour anyway. So technical difficulties aside, having some fun here on the College Football Roundup. Thank you guys for tuning in. As I just get the text from McCash, I think my internet just went out. Hey, that happens to the best of us. We got to roll with the punches here in the live production business, baby. This has been the College Football Roundup. You can follow him on social media at MC_Cash75. That is the utility man, Stephen McCash. He was here just a minute ago. If you're just now tuning in, we're signing off. It's too late, pal. I'm Stoney Keeley at Stoney Keeley on Twitter, at Sobros Network on all major social media platforms. Be sure to check out Memo's Mexican Kitchen out in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. You won't regret it. Let them know Stoney sent you and get you some of that Oh, here we go. We've got McCash back. I'm signing off, buddy.
Okay, bye.
Thoughts on Georgia, Kentucky? That was the last game to get to.
Georgia by 1,000,000.
There you go. SoBrosNetwork.com. Rate, review, subscribe to the College Football Roundup wherever you take in your podcast. We are out in these internet streets, baby. For the utility man, Stephen McCash, I am Big Natural Stoney Keeley. And until next week, you stay classy, college football.